Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I'm here with Carissa Hickling, and we're going to be talking about a variety of interesting topics. Carissa, first of all, give us a quick introduction to you.
Perfect. Well, I would say at my heart, I'm a problem solver, which means I love diagnostics, designing, and then most importantly, doing, which is why I have a background in consulting. But for the last many years, I would say that I am also a talent acquisition leader, and that too tricontinental. I grew up in Winnipeg, Canada, but many years ago moved to Mumbai, worked all across Asia Pacific, lots of different companies and settings. And then in 2019, I did something totally different, which is moved to Nuremberg, Germany, to join Siemens as their global head of talent acquisition, Siemens Digital Industries. That's a mouthful. It gets even more of a mouthful because my last role with them was at their center of excellence, leading talent acquisition, analytics, data, intelligence, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. But I think the key thing in all of this is that I think we're at a really interesting point for talent acquisition.
Yeah, so you're right. That job is a mouthful. I shudder to think how much of a mouthful it is in German with all the extra syllables that it would be.
Indeed,
So
indeed, indeed.
let's start by, I know you've got some perspectives on like what is work now and what's the future of work going to look like, and let's talk a bit about that, and then let's go on to like what does that mean for recruiters and the recruiter job. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, tell us your thoughts.
Well, I think, and that's just it. To me, overall, the shift is clear, and I think, particularly it translates into not just how TA works, but it's really changing what TA is, and that's because the nature of work itself is shifting. And I'm not the only one that's saying this. In fact, I really liked MIT's sort of humans in the loop research because it clearly articulated a simple but profound shift, which is that in many roles, AI doesn't remove the human, it moves the human upstream. So people are going from executing tasks into supervising outputs. And what that also means is you can't actually afford cognitive offloading. In fact, it's the opposite. You have to actually have an increasingly scarce capability around judgment, knowing what good looks like, catching the errors, and sometimes deciding when not to use AI at all. And so if we accept some of those premises, we then look at what does that mean for talent acquisition? Well, let's face it, actually, TA has always been a bit about making some informed guesses before you actually know what you're getting. So we're used to dealing with that uncertainty. But when you throw AI into that mix, we really have what is sometimes being described as a two-job problem. And
Hmm.
I really like
Yeah.
with Randstad, Glenn Cathy has recently put out something that I thought was really useful because it's quite concrete. And what he shares is he says, once you add an AI, people don't get one job with a faster tool. They actually have the original recruiting job, still got to get it done, even if it's enabled, but they also have a new one, which is an AI manager, which means delegating, reviewing, calibrating, and most importantly, owning the
Hmm.
results and the risk.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And so it's for recruiters specifically, what do we think the skill sets are? Which skill sets do we think are going to be less needed in this
Mm.
new world, and which are the ones that are going to be amplified?
So here also, I think, and I can speak to, when initially we started to look at AI, a lot of it was around creating really cool prompts and things like that. And I think here, even Anthropic AI Fluency, they've been putting out some really good stuff that sort of says actually, yes, the part of like prompting or having those conversations is important, but what is the competency that you actually need more is judgment and the
Yes,
management behaviors, which is
yes.
really deciding what to delegate, evaluating quality. And so I think also we do have a bit of a challenge here as well, is that AI in many cases for recruiters intensifies the work. If you're not sort of redesigning roles and capacity properly, and you're just saying, hey, do this task now, do it 10 times faster. Well, because you have to step back and actually say, am I getting the results that I want? Am I missing out on something here? Am I simply accentuating bias through this process? Unless we step back and really ask those questions and really contextualize things. And again,
Mm-hmm.
that's where a
Mm-hmm.
good recruiter really understands the context of their business, the environment within which they're operating, and ideally even pushes back in the design of roles to say, yes, this is the person that we're replacing, but the nature of the work has changed, and let's talk about that and amplify that when we're seeking out somebody that maybe could do things that the previous person didn't.
So let's go into this in a bit more detail. If
Yeah.
AI removes a lot of the administrative tasks and the repetitive tasks from what a recruiter job's been doing, let's say a recruiter job until today has been 60% doing kind of admin repetitive
Mm.
things and 40% has been using judgment. If it's now going to become 20% is doing admin repetitive things and 80% is using human judgment, does that mean we all burn out, or
I think it's
when?
yeah,
Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. I think burnout is a factor. And in fact, we're hearing increasingly more about it, even at conferences and everything. It's like that is a topic that was literally at FSTA in Hyderabad, where I was at a month or so ago. That was a core session purely on
yeah,
recruiter burnout. And I think this is just it, is the very element that is intended to enable is also disabling, because AI's kind of turned hiring into an arms race. I mean,
mm,
it's AI written CVs, AI outreach, AI scoring, volume explodes, signals collapse, and we're simply industrializing the parts that were already broken. And yet at the same time, the scale is real. I mean, there's so many jobs now that a single job will get tens of thousands of applicants. Automation is unavoidable. We
yeah,
absolutely have to do it. But as you say, that judgment element is even more critical,
yeah,
because if we run into a trap where all we're doing is becoming more efficient at rejecting exactly the candidates you most want, if you
hmm,
don't design for judgment, if you
hmm,
don't, and it isn't just human judgment, but I think this is the thing, and this is kind of why I talk a little bit about wild cards sometimes,
hmm,
is
hmm,
because my best hires throughout my career were actually not the ones that ticked all the boxes.
hmm.
They were the divergent ones. They were the
Yep,
ones that brought something that a traditional candidate didn't. And don't get me
yep,
wrong, this is not in every job. Like I have also designed, assessment centers doing manually what now we can do so well with full
yeah,
automation.
yeah,
Yet if we also go back to the original point, which is the nature of work itself is changing, and the need for people to have even more of that cognitive judgment,
yeah,
what that also means is that, a position is intensifying.
yeah,
So we're doing more with fewer people. And so the quality and caliber of that one hire is even more critical.
hmm,
And I don't know if you would agree with that, but I think to me, this is why, I really like the idea of wild cards. And I guess I've been considered a wild card in the past. And so
yep,
I like saying, how might we? And this is a design challenge I'd put out there to, like, if you're a TA leader today, or recruiter, don't just build a smart selection process.
yeah,
Take a cue from some of what I think are the most brilliant executive recruiters out there and intentionally design for the wild card. Always include in the shortlist someone who deliberately doesn't fit the pattern.
hmm,
And that's just, again, I challenge you. Sometimes the person that you are, let's take a classic example. You're hiring a designer to design a better bookstore website when actually what you need is creating Amazon to
yeah,
sell ebooks. Well, you're
yeah.
never going to find that person if you're not creating space deliberately for difference, for diversity.
So I definitely agree with this concept that the recruiter job is more important than ever because companies have got less like headquarter operations and like fixed headcount
Yeah.
is going to come down.
Yeah.
And so as it comes down, you're going to need more talent density. You're going to need more people that are Swiss Army knives.
Yep.
And therefore, every hire is more critical. And James Gardner was on this channel with me a couple of weeks ago
Yeah.
saying exactly this, talking about the fact that the recruiter job and the selection job is therefore going to be even more important within the organization. Now, I entirely agree with you about the concept of the wild card. So one of the best people I've ever hired is a guy called Stephen McGrath, who works with me in poetry and he worked with me in Candidate ID. And he didn't have the profile for either of those jobs
Yeah.
before I brought him in. But I knew that he would learn them and he could work out how to understand, how to do the job, and he could train himself in doing them. Um, and he's a wild card in every
Yeah.
kind of way.
Yeah.
And I really, really agree with your point. And so you feel like every shortlist needs a wild card.
I think so. Well, for positions that matter,
Yeah,
and I don't mean to say that yes, all positions matter, but there are certain volume roles that have where you actually do want to have some similarities. But there are a lot of roles out there, and this is where that density topic, that need to elevate and get more in the critical judgment space, where those wild cards I think are essential. They're absolutely essential, and I do think we can designed to spot them. Like, I
yeah,
don't think that's what I was saying. We can't get away from the automation, but there's a
yeah,
few tips or tricks that I would suggest. One of them is that, when you are building your shortlist, actually include a prompt, which is look for at least one or two candidates that have got a diverse background. They have either operated across different sectors, different geographies. So there's cues that you can bake in to sort of say, hey, I deliberately want to have a couple of candidates that don't fit the exact job profile that we're hiring for today, but have shown agility in their career in different ways and in different spaces. And that tends to be
yes,
your wild card.
yes,
It also can, to a certain extent, be something that if you open up the role, and Siemens had some great examples doing this with Arctic Shores, to do true skill-based hiring, which is where you
yeah,
don't have a CV and you utilize a really interesting assessment approach,
yeah,
which opens up the box.
yeah.
And I think these are just two things that top of mind are how you can design for a bit of a wild card in the equation.
So I think that we are moving with AI taking such a prominent role in white collar jobs now. I think we're moving towards a time when technical competence in finance or in marketing or in IT or whatever it might be, I think that's probably less important now than the skill of getting shit done.
Yes.
Interested to know what you think.
I totally agree. And being able to get shit done across different environments
Yes,
also, I
yes,
think is, and again, we often talk about, oh, this person's really resilient. Well, yes, actually, and I had a very interesting conversation with somebody, and I won't divulge full details, but what was essential in it is this was a place that had been impacted directly by the conflict that is occurring. And the individual said that they could see a marked difference in their team between those who had built-in resistance
yeah,
because their backgrounds were maybe not as privileged. Maybe they had had previous exposure to disasters or very difficult environments versus those that had a very sheltered life experience.
yeah.
And this was so difficult to adapt to because they'd never had a bomb go off in front of them. And I use this example as a stark one because that resilience, you need to have a few people in your team maybe that have got those hard knocks.
Yeah.
And I remember when I used to recruit for sales in India many years ago, and we had a brilliant bunch of people who were young. They were the sales managers. They were go 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 go, and all of my recruiters and trainers that I was responsible for bringing into the organization, I deliberately looked for people that had not been fully successful, that had had something in their life that kicked them in the teeth, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
recovered from it.
Yeah.
They reinvented themselves into a trainer. They reinvented themselves into something different because they could act as a coach.
Yeah.
They could bring that experience to the table in a way that that young person who was brilliant and
Yeah.
great, but
Yeah.
had a very different life experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also had a strategy of saying, let's also recruit not from the top tier universities, top tier cities,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
those that one job for that one person makes a difference, not only for them as a person, but for the family, the community. It just uplifts everything
Yeah.
by giving that opportunity to someone who otherwise did not have it.
Yeah.
And that I think is where resilience and strength in organizations come from, is when you build in a workforce that has got a few people in there who've, like me, white hair, been around the block, and have been there, done that, but are also still open to listening and learning to those that have got a very different life experience as well.
Carissa, I knew I was going to love this conversation. I have loved this conversation. We've got more to cut. We've got more to cover.
Yeah.
We're going to reconvene in a few days. What are we talking about next?
So I think this is the other thing that I think TA relevance to me now is also won or lost on moving both up and downstream.
Yeah.
So in other words, that we really are, if the nature of work itself is changing, then maybe we
Yeah.
need to get into that conversation earlier. And
Oh,
equally,
absolutely.
equally downstream means we can't just be responsible for ticking a box and saying we've got somebody who said yes to the job. Maybe
No.
we also need to start to be responsible more for some of the downstream outcomes, time to productivity, early performance signals, and more fun stuff like that.
Yeah, can't wait. I love that topic. Looking forward to it. I'll see you in a
Yeah,
few days' time, Carissa.
perfect.
Thank you for joining me today.
Great. Thank you so much.